Hey guys, it's Ness. Welcome back to my channel. Today I thought I'd just do something really casual and really fun because I've had a long day at work and I just want to talk about books because that is what brings me enjoyment. So I've never done this before. I don't know how this is going to work, but I've seen a lot of people doing tier makers about books and talking about ranking books and stuff. So I thought that I would go through all of the books that I've read that are of YA. These are just the first in a series. If I've read like the whole series, I've just put the first book in here. Sorry that they're a bit blurry. The quickest way of doing this was just to save the images directly off my Goodreads list. So they are blurry because they're supposed to be a lot smaller than this. This isn't exactly a comprehensive list of all of the YA books that I've ever read because I imagine that there's loads from that I've read when I was a teenager that I forgot to include in here, or like included on my Goodreads ever, and then I've just forgot that I've read them. And quite a lot of them as well people will just not have heard of, so I've not wanted to include them. So I think there's about 60 here, which seems like a good amount that I'm sure most people will have heard of most of them. So let's just get to tier ranking. So the way that I've done this is I have God tier, which is obviously like the best books from the YA that I've read. Commendable effort is the next step down, and that's books that I've enjoyed. I want to praise the author. They're not like my favourites, but I respect that they are good books. The next one is Meh, which is just books that I'm just okay about. Nothing special. Maybe I read them when I was younger and I thought they were nothing special, and my opinion hasn't improved. Next one down is Aged Bad. Maybe these are books that I did enjoy as a child, but, well, as a teenager, but looking back, they've not been great. And if I read them now, I would probably rate them 1 star, hate them, put them in get in the bin. But because I read them when I was younger, when I was a teenager and enjoyed them, they're going to go into Aged Bad. And the last one is Get in the Bin, which is just books that I didn't like then, I don't like now. I just don't like the books. So, let's start. So the first book on here is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, which is book 1 in the Grisha trilogy. I've read this, but you may have seen on my video from 2 days ago that I do plan on rereading this because I do own this book and the second book in physical copies, and it's either I need to get rid of them or give them another go. So the fact that I'm going to give them another go, I think, means I can't really put them in Get in the Bin or Aged Bad. I'm going to put it into Meh, because that's how I felt about it when I first read it, but I'm hoping that a new read of it might change my mind. So the next one is Cinder, this is book 1 in the Lunar Chronicles. And I really enjoyed this when I read it. I read it about 7 years ago and I've read the entire series. I really liked it, but I know some people read books 1, 2 and 3 when they first came out and tried to read the later books now and haven't enjoyed it as much, so maybe it's aged badly for them, but personally I think that was a commendable effort on Marissa Meyer's behalf to write this Cinderella retelling, which is sort of like urban fantasy and it's exciting, there's cyborgs. I really enjoyed it, I like the characters. The next one is Unbecoming of Mara Dyer. This was a young adult sort of gritty realism kind of book, I think. I can't remember if there's anything magical about it, but I didn't like it. I wouldn't say it was meh. I wouldn't say it aged badly because when I read it I didn't like it anyway, so I'm gonna unfortunately make this my first Get in the Bin book because there was just nothing about this that I enjoyed. Under the Never Sky is a book that I didn't read as a teenager. I read this in the last couple of years. This is a post-apocalyptic world, but it didn't really like stand out to me as much. I didn't really like it. I didn't like the characters. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad. I'm going to put it in Meh because I think some people might still enjoy it, and that's how I felt about the book at the time. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I did enjoy this when I read it. I wouldn't say it was God tier. It was just okay. It was a nice read at the time, so I'm going to put that into commendable effort. These Broken Stars is the first in a Sci-Fi series where you have teenagers sort of roaming the stars trying to find their way to safety. I'm going to put this in commendable effort because I thought it was very well written. It's written by Amy Kaufman, who is also the co-author of the Alumni series, but this is with a different co-author, and it's published by Disney Hyperion. I thought for a while it was well written. I thought the plot was unique. I didn't see the ending coming really, so it was a solid effort. Divergent. I'm going to put this in age badly because I don't know what it is about this, but I guess when I read the first book I enjoyed it at the time, but that was probably when it came out, so it was probably like 2010-ish, I'm going to say, and it came on the back of a lot of popularity for that genre at the time, which was sort of like the Hunger Games-ish, but I don't think it aged well at all. I haven't read any of the newer books, but I do know what happens at the end, and I think it was the end that put a lot of people off the series. I didn't think it was particularly well written or well thought out either. Just seemed like a very immature plot looking back on it, so I don't think that aged well. Shatter Me is another young adult series which is very popular, but I only read the first book of. I didn't like this at all, although I liked the concept and I wanted to like it. I was just very bored throughout. So I'm going to put this in get in the bin, because it's not like that I hate the book, it's just that there's nothing that I liked about it. So because I just dislike the book as a whole, that's why it's there. Don't come for me in the comments. I'm entitled to my own opinion. I just didn't like this book. The Assassin's Curse is another YA book that I was really looking forward to getting around to reading. I bought book 1 and book 2 in physical form on the anticipation or on the thought that I was going to love the book, and I really didn't like it. Again, there was nothing that I did like about it. It was so boring throughout. Wouldn't recommend it. I thought it was very overhyped. Asylum is a young adult horror book about a boy that ends up going on I think it's like a school trip to an asylum, or it's an old asylum that used to be in his like college dorm. So he finds all these pictures that are very haunting, and it's a little bit like another book we have on here, which is Mrs. Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I can't even remember what it's called, so that's going to be a great start when we come to that book. And it was just okay. I liked the concept, so I'm going to put it in meh. Yeah, it's going to stay in meh because I thought it was very original. I really liked it. I wouldn't necessarily say it was spooky, but maybe for YA that's all you needed, that level of spice. But it was just a meh. It was nothing special. Eleanor and Park. I loved the storyline. I loved the romance in it. But some stuff is problematic in it, which we're talking about on Twitter at the moment, if somebody wants to hop over onto the Twitters to be educated about some of the problematic elements of this book. So it's going to go in and get in the bin. I did like the overall plot. I thought Eleanor was a very nice character. She was very relatable for some people, especially my experience as a child. It's just some of the other things that the author has decided to write about with maybe not well researched, shall we say. To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This is probably one of my guilty pleasures. I'm going to put this in commendable effort. I usually don't really enjoy young adult romances because it's just not a genre that I really like. But To All the Boys I Loved Before is a very commendable effort. I really liked it. I liked the romance in it, and I also really liked the Netflix adaptation as well. Even though the second one wasn't that great, I really thought the first one was a good adaptation of the first book, and I liked the relationships with the sisters. I personally am an only child, so I don't have experience with sisters, but I thought there was a lot of like love-hate relationship between the three of them, which gave me, I don't know, it seemed realistic. It seemed like something that I would experience if I had siblings. September Girls, that is definitely a get in the bin. That is a proper get in the bin book, that, because that was just offensive. It's about a teenage boy and his brother and his dad, and they move to this island where girls are like obsessed with them, but they turn out to be like mythical creatures, and it was very offensive. It had a lot of things in which were really disgusting, and if you want to find out some quotes from there, I would direct you to my all the books I rated 1 star, where I read out some of the problematic quotes from that book, which are highly offensive. Next is The Fifth Wave. I read this a long time ago. I'm going to put it in, I'm torn between meh and commendable effort. I didn't think the writing was the best, and I didn't think it was the most original use of a post-apocalyptic alien theme, I want to put it in meh, just because I didn't think it was that original and I was quite bored in the second half, and also the characters are very forgettable, so it's staying in meh. We Were Liars is another one where I'm just going to put get in the bin. I didn't like this at all. I don't even know, this might be like virgin or new adult. I didn't like the plot twist at the end. I thought the plot twist was really unnecessary or really like not that great, and it just made me feel like I'd wasted my time on the entire book. 1,000 Pieces of You, I think that says. I can't really remember what happened in this book, and I didn't even read it that long ago, so it clearly just wasn't a memorable book for me. I'm going to put it into meh. I think I rated this 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. If I remember rightly, it's about a girl that's travelling through time and space to be somewhere or to do something, but it was just, I wouldn't read the sequel, so it's going in meh. Half Bad, again, this is a debut novel by an author who'd done a really unique take on witches and wizards and the whole magical society. I thought it was really well done. I really liked the main character. He was quite edgy and I really liked it. I'm going to put it in commendable effort though, because I did unhaul it. If it was that great, I would have kept it to reread, so the fact that I'm not going to reread it or expect to reread it, it's going to go into commendable effort. Although I do have books 2 and 3 to read, and I am looking forward to getting around to reading them. Since You've Been Gone by, I think this is Morgan Matson. This was a really good young adult contemporary, which again is a genre that I don't read a lot of, but I really enjoyed it. I'm going to put that into commendable effort. I would highly recommend it if you're looking for a book that's just like fluffy young adult romance and a lot of focus on friendship as well, which was what I really enjoyed, looking into friendship dynamics and development and becoming an older teenager and finding out who you really are and what you want to do in life. Really enjoyed that aspect. I have no idea what this book actually is. I think it's Don't Look Back, which is a young adult crime mystery. I really enjoyed it at the time, but I read this about 10 years ago, so I'm going to put it in aged bad, because I think if I read that now I wouldn't like it. And to be honest, I don't even know if I would recommend it, because I don't think it was that much of a good take on young adult crime. I've read some other good ones which apparently aren't in this list, so I don't. Oh yes, One of Us is Lying, but we'll come to that. So I think there are better ones. I think this is We All Looked Up, and this is a contemporary young adult about a group of friends who find out that an asteroid is going to hit the Earth, and they're spending their last days trying to think about what they want to do. I'm going to put that in meh. Actually, but it's a lot worse than some of the other books in meh. I'm going to put it in get in the bin. Oh my god, I'm being so harsh in this video. I'm so sorry to anyone. I hope I'm not offending you, but I don't mean to offend anyone. Usually when I do videos like this, I get like loads of downvotes because I'm assuming I'm offending people's favourite book. But that's just my opinion. We can't all like the same things. So anyway, I just thought the ending of this book was very meh, and I guess it was realistic in a way. It was a realistic take on what would happen if an asteroid hit the Earth and how teenagers would react. I don't know, I was just very like meh about it. More Than This by Patrick Ness. I love Patrick Ness's works. I've read A Monster Calls as well, which honestly was one of the best books that I've ever read. More Than This, I'm going to put in commendable effort, but it's almost God tier. I just did get a little bit bored throughout. It's about a boy who wakes up and the last thing he remembers is drowning, and he wakes up in a house in England, even though he was previously in America. It's in a house where he used to live in as a child. It looks exactly the same, but it's literally a ghost town. There's no one there, and he's trying to figure out, is this the afterlife? Is this the real world? And he's also trying to come to with a lot of personal hardships as well, and it does look into some issues surrounding LGBT plus and growing up as a teenager and mental health, and I did enjoy it. It is a commendable effort. Unspeakable is a YA that I read a long time ago, and that was a contemporary. I know it's LGBTQ plus, and it's about a girl who can't speak. She's disabled in that way, and she finds a romantic interest in a partner, but because I can't remember much about it, I'm going to have to put it in meh. I did read it as an advanced reader copy, so it would have been prior to the published date, which I think was about 5 or 6 years ago. So I just read it a long time ago, and it obviously didn't leave that much of a lasting impression. The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness, again, that's going to go into commendable effort, because I don't really remember too much about it, but I think the whole premise is we can't all be the hero, and that the main characters aren't necessarily the ones that are saving the day. There's some fantasy, paranormal elements to it as well, like magical beings and stuff. Or do I put it in meh? That's the one where I'm on the border between meh and commendable effort. It is the least favourite of my Patrick Ness novels that I've read, and in comparison to More Than This, it would be a meh, but it's still better than some of them on here. So I don't know, this tier making stuff is really hard. Like, really, I need like 10 tiers. A Darker Shade of Magic by V. Schwab. This is probably going to be the most controversial one, because I'm going to put that in meh. I didn't like the plot. I thought it was really boring. I think I actually rated this 2 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I just didn't like it. That is my first V. Schwab book though, so I do want to read more by her, because I don't want to have that taint my experience of her writing, and what I do plan on going out and buying more of her books. Rebel of the Sands. This is the first in a series where I have book 2, but I've not actually read book 2, but I did really enjoy Rebel of the Sands and would highly recommend it. I believe this is a retelling. No, this one isn't the retelling. Or is this one the retelling? I read 2 books that were really similar, and I think this one is about genies and magical beings. I think I might be getting this mixed up with another book, but I do know that I really liked both of them a lot, so if you're looking for something that's a little Arabian Nights, I would highly recommend that one. Alumni is probably going to be the first that I'm going to put into God tier. I know there's some issues surrounding Jay Kaufman at the minute. Is that his name? No, it's Amy Kaufman. It's Jay Kristoff. I know there's some issues surrounding him at the moment. Some of the things he's got up onto the Twitter tweets. I'm going to ignore that and just focus purely on this book, because this book is honestly one of my favourite books of all time, even though some people aren't that amazed by it. What I really loved about it was the first book that I've read like this that was of mixed media format. This is a book that's a series of documents and illustrations, text, and you have to try and piece together the storyline from that, which I really, really liked. I thought it was very unique and very different. I would really recommend it to someone that's just bored with reading books in general and just wants something a bit more exciting. My fiance, who is not a reader at all because he struggles very severely with dyslexia and he finds reading to be such a chore, he really enjoyed this book, and the fact that this book allowed him to sit down and actually read something made this book very special for me. So that is my reasons. Fans of The Impossible Life, I want to put in commendable effort. Again, another young adult contemporary. I didn't realise how many I'd read until now. And this is a book that's set in the UK, I think. And I'd highly recommend it if you're looking for something that's a bit more like Skins in Literature. You know, the British TV show that I think they adapted in the US but totally bombed. But it was great in the UK. This is a book about 3 characters who are teenagers and they're all struggling. One of them has very severe crippling depression, another one is very shy and he really struggles to do anything because of his shyness, and another one is living in foster care and he is gay, and they're struggling to cope with some of the things that are going on in their life, and they're trying to support each other through it. I would recommend that for people who are looking for a gritty realism YA. I believe this is Glass Houses, which is the first book in the Morgan Vampires trilogy that I read. Trilogy. Who am I saying this is trilogy? This is like 14 books. This is anything but a trilogy. This is a book that I read when I was about 13 and started reading the series up until I was about 17. It was a guilty pleasure at the time. I think now looking back, it has definitely aged bad. At the time, it was absolutely like revolutionary. I'd just come off the back of Twilight, and this book was about a girl who moves to the middle of a desert for university in America or college, and she moves in to this shared house where one of them is like a ghost, one of them is a vampire. No, there's no vampire, there's just like a really goth girl and another guy, I think called Shane, and the town is overrun by very evil vampires and they have to like fight the evil society vampires. It was a lot. Okay, It had everything going for it, but it has not aged well. Hunger Games. This is a really hard one to rate because I really loved this as a teenager, but I would definitely not reread this. I think the films were maybe better than the books, which is something that I never say. I'm so tempted to put this into aged badly just because for me, I wouldn't enjoy this anywhere near as much as what I would have done as a teenager, but the final book in the series has totally cemented how I feel about this. It's aged badly because I didn't like the last book at all, and I feel like thinking about it again as an adult, I definitely didn't like the last book, so it's going in aged badly. In Ember and Ashes, that is another one which I'm going to put in God tier. I really enjoyed this book. Is this a retelling? It feels like it might be a retelling, but it's like a totally unique story. I think it's more like a retelling of like a Romeo and Juliet situation, but I really enjoyed this book. I might actually make an entire video about this because I've only read the first one, but I do have the second one. I think there's 4 books in the series now. In the first one, I remember just not sleeping because I had to read it and I had work the next day, and I didn't finish it till like 6 o'clock in the morning, at which point I thought I might as well just get up and go to work, and went to work and couldn't stop thinking about what I just read. I really loved it, and I really liked the characters. I thought it was a very interesting, well-paced, well-written YA adventure romance book. And I'm dying to get round to book 2. There was just such a gap between getting book 1 and getting book 2 that I pretty much forgot what had happened, and I'm only going to read a second book in a series if I know exactly what's happened in book 1. Otherwise, I'm going to give book 1 a reread and then move on to the second one, which is why it takes me so long to actually finish series. That's why I prefer just reading standalones, because I like to go over and reread exactly what was in the first one, and then that just takes me forever to get around to finishing a series, because sometimes I have to reread the first book like 7 times. Oh, what's happened? Caraval. I have some thoughts about this book, and they're not pretty. I really didn't like this book. Caraval, how do I describe this? I don't want to be mad about someone's baby and about someone's piece of work and about a book that I'm sure a lot of people love and it's gotten through about hard times. I really didn't like it. I hated the plot. I thought it was really stupid. And with that, we'll move on to Marked. This again was another book that was just coming out of my Twilight phase. I feel like anybody my age who read Twilight has also heard or read this book. But it has definitely aged the worst out of every single book on here. It is this one that's aged the worst, and I absolutely hate it. It's got everything bad in that we should have known better in the 2000s, but it's the 2000s, I think the late 2000s, and it is just so bad. It's got like SLUT shaming in, it's got girls just picking on other girls for their looks. I don't know, it's just not very like female friendly, even though that was the target audience. So this book is about a girl who becomes a vampire of a sort, but vampires are like a lot different in this series. I wouldn't recommend this at all if you're curious. Don't even get curious because it's just bad. There's about 10 books in this series, and it's about a main character called Zoe, and she's trying to navigate evil in her vampire world and trying to get rid of the evil goddess vampire and navigate her love life. One of the books is just totally set in this like dream state or a dreamland, and it's just bad. Next, 3 Dark Crowns. I'm going to put that in God tier as well because I really love this series. The series was so much fun. I haven't read the last book yet, but I do own it, but I want to go back and binge read the entire series to enjoy it the most. I thought this series was very unique. I love all of the characters. I love how well fleshed out the characters are. I've never read a book that's maybe this imaginative. I thought Kendall Blake has done a fantastic job of thinking about a very unique world and a very unique plot. In this book there are 3 sisters that are all in line to inherit the throne of this land, and they're all different magical abilities. So one of the sisters is she can speak to animals and she's very much like a naturalist, and then another one is a poisoner who's she's immune to poisons, and another one can control the elements. They're all equally as powerful as each other. They're all raised by different families with their respective powers, and the land basically is willing to go to war over these girls, and is so good. Night World, I'm going to put in commendable effort. If you've heard of Night World, give this video a thumbs up because I honestly don't think a lot of people have actually heard of this. This is a very old series. I think this series is from the 90s, and I don't know how I came about it. I think I just went into, at the time was Borders, which I think was an American bookshop that moved over to the UK but didn't do so well, so moved quickly back out of the UK. And I just went to sort of like the Twilight marked section. I think Twilight I'd finished with, Morganville Vampires and marked. I was waiting for their next installments to come out and found Night World. And there's 3 volumes which all have 3 short stories in each, so that's 9 short stories. And at the end, I think this is L.J. Smith or something. She was supposed to be writing like the 10th book, or the 10th story, which would wrap all of these short stories up together, and it never appeared. It just never materialized. And anybody that knows anything about this series would just understand the disappointment of not getting that final book that just finished off every single short story plot. These books were sort of like about different creatures like demons and vampires, but they're genuinely really good, and I think it's probably going to be the only vampire-esque book that's going to end up on any shelf that is not aged bad. I thought it was a really good effort. I really enjoyed them, and I would actually still recommend them to anybody who likes or enjoys vampires. They're very short and they're all sort of like romancy based, but they're very good. One of Us is Lying, again, I read that this year, so you probably know about it because I've spoke about it a lot. I had this included in my best books of 2020 so far video. This is a young adult crime mystery. 5 students go into detention, but only 4 of them come out. Sadly, one of them dies, and the police think that it has to be the other 4 students, or one of the other 4 students, that have caused their deaths. So these students are working together, they're unlikely friends, to try and solve the riddle of what happened and clear their names. Really enjoyed it. Definitely commendable effort. Almost God tier. Okay, I totally forgot that this one was on here. So when I was talking about which one was A Darker Shade of Magic being the most controversial, I think this one is actually going to be the most controversial. I really like this author so much as well, so it really pains me to put them in this scenario where I'm going to put them in meh. This is a book that I would still recommend people try and pick up. I was just very bored with it, but I really wish I hadn't, because I'd love to continue on with the series, but I just wasn't invested in it at all. This is a series about a girl that gets taken to the king's court to be like a concubine, and she is there with other concubines, and they're trying to cope. They live in a world where they are seen as to be very lower class citizens. It's very fantasy based. It's not all like humans, there's other creatures too, which is just too much for me at the time, I think. Solid effort for the writer, but I'm sorry, there was just nothing that I liked about it. Personally, I would recommend it, but for me, it's on the meh shelf. As You Wish is an arc that I read, which I think teenagers are granted wishes, or you're granted wishes when you come to a set birthday, and it's set in the Mojave Desert. At the time, I really liked this because I rated it 5 stars on Goodreads, but I think now looking back, I don't think it was that great, so I'm going to put it in aged badly, even though I only read this about 6 years ago. I think looking back, it wasn't as good as what I thought it was when I first read it, but I really wanted to read something that was set in the Mojave Desert, which was why I read it. I don't know why, it was just a place that I wanted to read a book set in for. Children of Blood and Bone, I'm going to put into... The first half of the book goes into God tier, and the second half of the book goes in commendable effort, so I'm going to put it into commendable effort overall. I really enjoyed this book and I would really recommend it. It's got such a unique magic system, it's got such a unique setting, but the characters were a little bit stereotypical YA. There is definitely insta-love, which is something I didn't like. It's very tropey, but I just wish that it wasn't, because this book was really well written, and there was a lot of moments in it which were genuinely so entertaining. This would make a fantastic series on Netflix. Holes was a book that I read in school because school made me watch the movie, and I really liked the movie and knew it was based on a book, so I decided I wanted to read the book. I liked it, and I think I've read it a lot of times over the years. I'm going to put in a commendable effort because it is just very unique. It's a very old book actually, and it's about a child or a teenage boy who is accused of a crime and is sent to a correctional facility in the middle of nowhere, and they have them just digging holes all day. I would rewatch the movie. Definitely, it has the Shia LaBeouf in, and he's quite good in it. It's one of his very early roles. Eve of Man by Giovanna and Tom Fletcher, who is of the band McFly. This isn't that much of a popular book outside of the UK, and I don't know why, because I really love it, and it's so good. I have read the second book, which was a little bit of a disappointment, but there's still the third book to go, which I'm hoping is going to redeem the series. But for the first book alone, it was absolute god tier. I've read this multiple times. I would highly recommend it if you're into oh my god, Sci-Fi. I haven't put Sci-Fi on here. Okay, pretend that Sci-Fi also goes into god tier, please. That should go there. I don't know how I totally missed that. So yeah, Sci-Fi and Eve of Man in god tier, and they're very good. If you like Eve of Man, I'd recommend Sci-Fi. If you like Sci-Fi, I'd recommend Eve of Man. Just them with Three Dark Crowns as well. They are just a good group of books where if you like one of them, I would highly recommend you try the rest of them. Eve of Man is about a girl who is the last girl that's been born in 50 years. So for her protection, she's put in the top of a tower, and she's watched over by the last remaining women on Earth, who are all very elderly. And they're trying to find her a mate so that they can get her making babies to try and repopulate the planet, basically, because without her reproducing, humans are going to die out. And it's very post-apocalyptic. It's set in London. London is flooded. Natural disasters are happening here, there and everywhere. Sci-Fi as well, I'll talk a little bit about that, even though it doesn't exist. But Sci-Fi is also post-apocalyptic, set in a world where humans have advanced beyond natural death. The only way to die now is by being gleaned by a Sci-Fi who is a professional who follows a very strict moral code about who they kill and how they kill. And it's very good. I would highly recommend. The Priory of the Orange Tree. I was a little bit confused about whether I would class this as YA or new adult. I'm more leaning towards new adult because it does have some adult themes in. The relationship is more adult and the characters are more grown up. But some people class it as YA, so I've included it. That is also god tier. This is a very long book. This is about an 800-page book, but it is a standalone, which I really enjoyed. You'd expect something like this to be part of like a 10-book series, and it's not. I appreciated it, and it's LGBTQ plus 2. Enjoyable for the fantasy realm. I really enjoyed it. It's got dragons in it. It's got royal families in it. It's a little bit like Game of Thronesy, but female friendly and safe, and with very good characters and very unique. I would highly recommend it. It's worth sticking with. The first couple of 100 pages are all like set in the scene because it is a standalone, and it's trying to create this amazing world, and it really plays off in the end. It's well worth sticking with the info dump. Heartstopper is going in god tier as well. This is a graphic novel comic series about an LGBTQ plus couple at school and how their friendship and relationship develops. I've said a lot about it in my videos, so I'm not going to say too much about it here because it's been in so many of them. Percy Jackson is on the upper here tier, whatever here that is, because it's just so much better than everything that I've ever read ever. I think this is, it could be classed as middle grade, I guess, because in this book Percy is 12, but I'm going to say that for the purpose of this it's YA. I'm not too sure where it fits, if I'm honest. Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, I'm just going to say if you haven't read it, you have to buy it and read it because it's absolutely amazing. I've spoke about it a lot. If you want to see some more information on it, I've recently done a Percy Jackson series review where I break down a non-spoiler and then spoilers discussion for every single book going forward. It's about an hour long. I just live for it riding at the moment. Warcross by Marie Lu, that is I was really looking forward to getting this book. As soon as I heard about this book before it came out, I knew this was something that I had to have in my possession and read straight away, and it just really didn't live up to the hype, unfortunately. I keep going to do this because I see something like the hair and I think it's this side and it's not, it's this side, but we'll just ignore that. I was really looking forward to this book and it just didn't live up to my expectation. I didn't like the characters and I thought the plot was just very basic and not exciting. Twilight. Moving on. The Girl in Red. This is a young adult fairy tale retelling of Little Red Riding Hood, set in a post-apocalyptic world. I'm going to put that into commendable effort because I really enjoyed the plot as a whole, and I enjoyed the characters. I thought it was well paced, so I'd recommend that one. A Curse So Dark and Lonely would have probably been in commendable effort, but the ending totally ruined it for me. It had too many tropes. It was so cheesy. The ending literally made me like cringe physically, and I ended up having to like roll myself into my duvet because it was just so cringy. I couldn't finish it. Some parts were also very repetitive as well when they kept going from one place to another place. There was only like there was 3 locations in the book, but one of them only at the start and at the end. And then the rest of the book was only set in like the castle and then this like tavern place. And the character just kept going backwards and forwards between the two. It just seemed very repetitive. Girl, Serpent, Thorn, I'm going to put commendable effort. This is a very recently published. I think it's only out this week. But I did read an arc some time ago. This is a young adult. Again, LGBT. We stan all the LGBTs on this list. The plot was a little bit meh. There was some points where I just thought I could stop reading this and be okay. It was a commendable effort on the author's behalf to incorporate a lot of mythology. I don't know, in the end I did appreciate it for what it was, but as I was reading it I did just keep thinking, when is this going to end? Which isn't great for a book, but it's definitely better than meh. It's better than a lot of these books in here. Hush Hush. Again, one I read when I was about 13, and I loved it when I was 13. I thought this was like the best thing ever because it was the best book that I'd ever read, which had angels in it, or fallen angels. And at the time I was obviously reading a lot of vampire books, and it was just a little bit of a break from them. But this was actually a very terrible book. I think I rated this 4 out of 5 stars or 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. But honestly, this would be like in 0 out of 5, get in the bin, but this just aged so bad. Stolen, this was a young adult contemporary novel. To me it seemed very much based on a film that Martin Sheen was in the 70s or maybe the 60s, where this girl is kidnapped by someone but ends up developing Stockholm syndrome because they realise that the captor is going through some things. But honestly, the Martin Sheen movie did it better. I'm going to put this into meh. Paper Towns by John Green. That was just really boring. I'm just going to put that and get in the bin and deal with it because it was honestly so boring, and it's the only book I've read by John Green, and I decided at that point maybe his books weren't for me. And I'm in The French Kiss. I'm going to put in a commendable effort. This is a contemporary romance about a girl who goes to do her gap year. I think it's her gap year anyway. It could have just been like a random placement that she had for school. And she moves to Paris. She gets like a French love interest. I think he's French. I can't remember too much about it. It could go in there, but it's going to stay in commendable effort for now. Don't know if I'd recommend it, but I might continue on with the series because I know they are sort of like standalone. Oh, sorry, I've done it again. They are like standalone books. So, we'll see. Mallory Blackman, Noughts and Crosses. This destroyed me as a child. Absolutely destroyed. I swear I still have nightmares over this book and what it done to me 15 years ago. Was it 15? How old am I? Yes, it probably would have been about 15 years ago I read this. I have to put this in God tier because never has a book ever moved me as much as this one. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. Oh, I can't say too much about it because I'm honestly going to cry. But if you want a book where you're just going to cry your eyes out, excuse me? But you're just going to cry your eyes out. It talks about racial issues. Just read it. Okay, moving on. Clockwork Angel, The Infernal Devices. This is the only book that I've ever managed to finish of Cassandra Clare. Is that her name? I'm not sure. She also wrote like The City of Bones and everything, which I couldn't finish because honestly didn't like it. Tried to watch the Netflix series about it. That was equally as bad. But this is the only book I've read by her that I actually finished. I read this, I would say, about 15 years ago as well, and at the time it would have been a commendable effort, but now looking back it was probably a meh. But I have been thinking that I want to reread this. If I can get this book maybe for like £1, I would reread it so I could finish the series because I really like the steampunkness of it. But other than that, I just thought it was a little bit meh. The Diviners is probably going to go into God tier. This is probably the most questionable of the God tiers that I've put in, because it is a very, very, very good mystery book. I think the ending is, I didn't see it coming. It's a really interesting world. It's set in the 1920s, and it's a girl that moves to, I think it's Manhattan. There's spirits, it's spooky, spooky, scary. There's a museum of scary things, and it's a really good book. If you have it on your TBR, I'd highly recommend boosting it up on your TBR to read it sooner rather than later. It is part of a series, but I've only read the first book, but I really, really, really liked it. Throne of Glass. I got up to, I think it was book 5. I really enjoyed book 1 and I really enjoyed book 2, but then the plot started changing a lot, and it was too much of a change because I didn't like the change. It introduced a lot of new characters that I didn't like. I'm going to put it in meh because I did like books 1 and 2, which did redeem it for me. Daughter and Smoke and Bone again is another Upon my first reread, I thought it was a commendable effort, but now looking back at it, I'm going to put it in meh. It wasn't that exciting, to be honest, and it was very not memorable. I remember that there's something about an other world where this teenage character who is an artist goes and visits her adoptive parents who are magical beings in this other world, and I think it's got something to do with angels in it, but it was just so not memorable and so not inspiring. Legend by Marie Lu. I read this prior to An Ember in Ashes, and I think this is a Les Mis retelling. Don't quote me on it. That's just what I remember of this, and it wasn't good at all, and it really sort of put me off that whole type of book altogether. I wasn't going to read An Ember in Ashes because I didn't like this one. I'm going to put it in aged badly, because I think if I'd actually read this a couple of years sooner, I would have enjoyed it. I would have thought it was okay. But when I did get around to reading it, it did almost put me off an entire genre of YA books, and I really didn't nearly read An Ember in Ashes, which was just miles and miles better than this one. Peculiar Children. This is a young adult novel, which is attempted to be like a supernatural or a superhero horror, and it has like scary, spooky images in that aren't that scary after you see the first one. I mean, the first one is quite shocking, but then after that it's just like a little bit boring. I'm going to put this in meh because I just totally wasn't inspired by this. I wouldn't continue on with the series. And the last one is Across the Universe, which again is a meh. This is a science fiction book which is set in space about a crew of people who are in like a comatose state, and they're trying to get to a distant planet to live and to research, is what I think, and people start prematurely waking up. There's some romance involved, but honestly I read this after reading These Broken Stars, and it just didn't live up anywhere near to These Broken Stars. Highly recommend that. If you're looking just for one of them to read, I would pick this one personally over picking this one. So there we go. I'm finished tier ranking all of the YA books that I've read, apart from You Have to Imagine That Sci-Fi's on there as well. I'm so sorry. I actually have a lot more in God tier than what I thought I would, and a lot more in Get in the Bin as well. I think it's quite evenly spaced. I think as a reading record, that's pretty decent. I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. I think there's a lot of good reads on here. I would especially recommend everything in God tier. From Commendable Effort, I would recommend Cinder, Aristotle and Dante, Children of Blood and Bone, These Broken Stars, Half Bad, Night World, and Rebel of the Sands. I would recommend for people that are looking for YA sapphic books to try Girls of Paper and Fire, because you might like it, even though I did not. Also recommend for people that love general YA to try A Curse So Dark and Lonely. I didn't like it, but I feel like other people would. I feel like I don't need to recommend Shadow and Bone because most people have read that. And I'd probably recommend nothing in the last 2 rows. Thank you so much for watching. If you've watched this in full, commendable effort on your behalf, and thank you for watching, subscribing, liking. I really appreciate all the support that I get on this channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.